Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dental CEO Podcast. My name is Dr. Cole Brenny, founder of PracticingDentist.com, where I teach dentists to master the business of dentistry and to build practices that they love. On this podcast, we're going to be talking with real-world practicing dentists and masters in the industry. Stay tuned to learn more about how to build and grow your own dental practice. For this podcast episode, I'm speaking with Bob Schafer, an architect at Foundation Architects here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Bob's going to share with us some practical steps to set up your dental practice, especially if you're looking to build. And he'll talk about marketing points and how your office interior, your decor, and your setup all play into how to attract the type of patients that you want and to display the type of culture you want your office to be about. So stay tuned. He's got some great tips for you guys. Well, thanks for coming on, Bob. Bob is an architect for Foundation Architects here in Minneapolis, and he's going to share with us some advice and tips on how to design and open a dental practice. So this will be pretty relevant to a lot of you young dentists that haven't heard this in dental school or haven't heard it your first couple years out in practice. So thanks for coming, Bob. Welcome.
Thank you. I've been an architect for a long time. We do a lot of dental clinics, so I have a lot of experience working with older dentists, younger dentists, kind of all different realms of the dental world, and we act as both kind of a designer, architect, and somewhat of a consultant at times as well. And so this is kind of just some slides that kind of help you to see some of the process and what we go through.
Awesome.
So the first one's just a nice picture of a dental clinic. This is Riverstone Dental up in Princeton, Minnesota, that we worked on. Kind of a fun little project. The first thing I would always stress to everybody is to set up your own kind of team. And who it is the next question. And you can see on my slide, the dentist is kind of in the middle of all these other things going on, and it's kind of a bit of a confusion. As my next slide says, it's just a lot of confusion, really. And if you can set it up, I can go through it and kind of give you some principal players in it and what your team should be. And once you can set up a team, you'll find that things will go a lot smoother. The team starts to work together. The different players on the team will actually exchange information to help you succeed. So one of the first things you need is a bank and a banker to get. They'll go through with your credit and your loan capacity, interest rates, different types of loans you can do depending on the type of project you're going to do, and also kind of figure out what you can afford. And from what I've seen, most dentists can start up a practice and get funding for it pretty readily.
Awesome.
The next person, of course, is the foundation architect. Get your architect involved. The earlier, the better. We like to get involved early so that we see where, if somebody's looking at a space in a office building, medical office building, or in a strip mall, or or they want to build their own building, we see their site or we see the building location. We've looked at some before where a dentist is looking for a particular thing, and we see a space and we just tell them not to get that space because it's really never going to succeed for what they want.
Mm-hmm. So what are some reasons for that? I mean, what are the red flags that you see pop up?
One of the spaces we went to see, the building was it was hard to find and hard to get to.
Gotcha.
You could see it from the highway, but you couldn't get to it.
Gotcha.
And even I had trouble with MapQuest and stuff trying to find, where this dentist was. And in the process, I drove by 2 other dental clinics before that.
Gotcha. Interesting.
Also, just that the space, like we've had dentists where they say that they want every chair to have a window. They want that comfort level for their patients. And then they're looking at a space where I know design-wise we can't do that. Mm-hmm. We won't be able to do it. We won't be able to get the chairs aligned with the windows properly, or the space is too long and narrow and it really doesn't suit itself for it.
Gotcha.
So things in the design realm, things in just the location realm.
Gotcha. Okay.
Look for an architect that can help you, that has a lot of dental experience, because will talk the same language as you and understand, the other members of the team and what they're doing. The projects typically will turn out much, much better then. Also, I would say look for somebody who has a sensitivity to your needs and who can be creative with it, and budget conscious. And I like to also put in sustainability because the sustainable aspects of a clinic isn't just about saving the world. It's also keeping your clinic healthy for your patients.
Gotcha. Cool.
And you can see along the bottom of the slides kind of almost like a timeline of your project. And right now I have, the architect's kind of role in it. The arrow kind of loops around the things that we're involved with most. We also help with location and funding sometimes as well, because the banks also often contact us and talk to us directly about things.
Awesome.
The next slide is about the contractor. So early on, it would be helpful to get a general contractor that you like, that has dental experience. I always stress that the dental experience with a general contractor is a huge thing. Also that understands your process and the schedule, and the costs are also built into all that as well. And then we go on to your dental equipment supplier. They come in sometimes first, sometimes before anybody else comes in, because you already know one, or you've worked with one at your current office or your past office or something. But you'll need somebody like that because they'll help us to make sure we're putting the equipment in the right spot, to make sure we have the proper clearances. And sometimes they'll do some real rough layouts even before we get involved. They know your equipment. They'll be able to service it and maintain it, and they give you costs for the equipment end of the project. You'll need some kind of a marketing consultant. Sometimes that comes in a consultant like Cole is, has dental experience, understands the process and the costs, and sees kind of a creative approach for you. It helps in a lot of different ways. Sometimes as the architect, we design a space or we pick out color schemes for a space that help to brand you and help to create a better brand for your clinic, your office.
Awesome. Yeah, that's the fun part. That's what I love. So Bob and I have talked a lot about working together to help put together kind of the space, and your marketing as part of a foundational brand building idea, because the space when patients walk in is huge, and that's what you guys do, Bob, is build the experience, right? The first introduction when they walk in. So yeah.
The first impression is everything. Just like in marketing materials, you may hand somebody your business card, or you may have an ad in a publication or something. That's what they see of your practice. When they walk in that front door of your clinic, or if they see your building, they automatically create sort of an impression of what you are and what you can be. And so the first impression is everything. The overall impression becomes their experience then.
Right. Awesome.
So then you also need a technology consultant, somebody with dental experience who understands some of the software, the equipment, how it needs to be set up, and that can service and maintain it. And that's somewhat budget conscious as well, so that you're not just paying a ton for computers and stuff. And they'll work with us throughout. As you start to look for an actual space or an actual building, you'll want to get a commercial property broker in there. I do say commercial rather than residential. They have a different approach to things, and they understand the commercial end of it. Preferably find somebody with dental experience that has worked with a lot of dentists before. It creates, they understand what the spaces are and what your needs are better, and they understand some of the pitfalls, such as like a dental clinic needs more heating, ventilation, air conditioning system needs than, say, a H&R Block office. So sometimes the mechanical systems aren't big enough, and we have to add one, which adds a lot of cost to a project. So the sooner you know that, or before you actually sign a lease, the better, because it can get built into the cost of the lease. You also want to find somebody who has regional knowledge that can place you in an area, and they know where other dentists are and where other dentists that you would be competing with are located, so that they're not putting you, across the street from somebody who you're going to be competing with all the time. It'd be better to be down the street. And then a lawyer, you'll need a lawyer, preferably with dental experience again, to review the lease and the mortgage, review any contracts, and understand kind of what approach you want to take to that. There's some flexibility in that, whether you want to really fight, and get the lease you want, or to work with the broker and try and get the lease to work the best for you, but with somebody else involved. And then insurance, you'll need insurance for your dental clinic, obviously, but you'll also need insurance through the project. So there's often loan requirement in the banker's loan requirements. They might require certain types of insurance, and so you'll want to get somebody involved. There's also construction coverage as well that you'll need. And the next slide kind of shows the dentist with all the different kind of team players that you would be in. There's a few others that certainly can get added, but these are kind of the main ones that you'll want to look for, and they can actually be somewhat organized, and they'll work for you once you pull them together.
Yeah, it's a good list. So to everybody who's listening, you guys know that I talk a lot about your expert network, and it's interesting, Bob, because the stuff you're bringing up for generally, to build a new office, you need the same people that you need, to buy an older practice or to merge another practice. You should always have all these people. Any dentist should always have on hand all the time, right? Obviously, if you're building a new practice, the architect contractor come up pretty high on the list. So this is great.
Mm-hmm. And we've actually, and even when you're transitioning or buying an existing practice, oftentimes we'll get involved to upgrade that clinic. They want to add a treatment room, or they want to upgrade the waiting room. So we'll get involved sometimes fairly early in that process as well.
Awesome. Cool.
So what does an architect do for you? I'll be specific. If you look on the bottom, we kind of help with all of this stuff. We get involved in it all in some level or other throughout the project. We go into a lot of different things. We work with what your idea is for your practice. Oddly enough, we work with your work hours. We understand, because that affects how many treatment rooms you might have, and how it's set up, how you want your life to be, your family, your lifestyle, when you want to take vacations. All that stuff actually comes into what we design into a clinic. So that's your ideas that we play with. Also where, depending on the location, it may affect how we design a clinic. And so, as they've always said, location is everything. Location, location, location. So we want to look, and certain of the team members will also help you to find locations that will work the best for you, so you don't have to fight to compete. You're just kind of in a great position to start with. And then we work with your budget a lot, so we need to know your budget up front, what you think it's going to be, what the bank is going to loan you, some of that kind of stuff. Sometimes we get involved also to help the bank figure out what to loan you, depending on the size of a space you're looking at and things like that. So we get involved in the construction, and the budget is construction equipment fees, art, furniture, and then also the bank will have some operating kind of set aside money for you as well. We look at zoning codes, what the use of the property is, what the use of the building or the space is that you're looking at, if there's proper parking, if there's enough parking, and then what the area availability is. And then we work with you to get drawings together to get a building permit for you. Without the building permit, you can't go ahead and build your clinic. Most of the time in Minnesota or Wisconsin, you need a building permit, so you need an architect's signature on a set of drawings to get that building permit. You'll need to look at existing conditions of what is there, what you're going to do with it, whether it's and you'll want us involved to look at all that to know what's there so that we can build a clinic that will really work for you and not just use up your budget on things that don't apply, kind of. The next thing you'll need to look at is programming. This can start whenever you want, but we'll start it once we start working with you. We'll need to know some things like what kind of spaces are needed is really what programming is, and where they should be, what size they should be. So we talk about number of treatment rooms and delivery methods and what kind of equipment you might get. We recommend that you plan for 500 square feet per treatment room. It depends on the size of the clinic, what that real square footage is. Now that includes hallways and accessory spaces and everything within that 500. So if you're going to do 6 treatment rooms, you need about a 3,000 square foot space. Now we've done bigger than that, and we've done smaller than that, but that's a good kind of rough rule of thumb for you to work with. And then you start to talk about like waiting room chairs. You can go on to the next slide where it's reception desks. Like how many staff do you think you'll have? We recommend a reappointment desk. And just to remember, first impressions are everything. So we'll want to make sure we spend some of your money in that waiting room to make it look like you are as successful as you are. We get into all the different rooms and how you can do it, what goes into every room, all the way down to the cabinets and what are in the cabinets. So then one of the other big questions is how do you want your office to feel? On the next slide, it's about your patient demographics and what patients you currently have versus what you want to have. So if you're starting a practice from scratch, you want to kind of have an idea of who you're actually aimed at. So if you're aimed at more of an older group, and you find a space that's right near a number of adult kind of retirement home areas, that's great. If you are aimed for more families, then you'll probably want to be more located towards that. This also enters into how we design the clinic too. So if you're pretty much going to have, an older population, then we don't have to spend a lot of time or money doing a little kids area unless you think they're going to have grandchildren there with them or something, which doesn't happen as much. But it's also a look that you want to portray in the clinic. And then we start to design. Once we have some of that information figured out, we design, we take into account various things, the goals versus your program, all your needs, and then versus the constraints, so the constraints of the space. So the goals are your budget, your what you want it to look like, how you want it to feel, things like that. And so each of these is kind of played off each other in the design process. And the next slide is kind of the other aspect of what we design is function versus aesthetics and then versus budget. So function versus aesthetics is easy sometimes because we know what you need to do, we know how to make it work, and then we can make it look good, but we also have to work within your budget, and that changes that a little bit and makes it a little more complicated, but that's what we do for you. And then one of the big aspects that we do as a firm is we put together design options for you. So if you look on the next page, we have two clinics. If you look from left to right, they're actually the same space, two very different looking clinics. The treatment area is about the same, but everything else kind of moved around a lot. And for this particular dentist, we were trying different options. I think we showed her, 4 or 5 different options actually. And out of these two, we actually came up with a third one, which is the next one. You can start to see in our construction drawings that it's very similar to one of them, but takes some of the aspects of the second one into account. So in effect, what we've done is kind of empowered the dentist to direct us towards what they like. And that gives you a little more power to get the clinic you really want. So construction drawings, we put together these. You can see that they're very complicated. I'll go through these fairly quickly. This is like just a floor plan. And then we go into bidding. So this brings up your team again with your contractor, bankers, et cetera. And there's different ways of bidding a project. There's a typical where you put it out to bid with 2, 3, 4 contractors. Or the other is if you have a team member that's a contractor already in there, you can do a negotiated bid, which is often sort of an open bid where they bid it out to a lot of subcontractors, and then you see an overall number that you can play with, and they open their books to you typically, so you get to see what they're charging, what everybody's charging, and it's kind of I always feel it's a nicer process because it works together with everybody. And then once construction starts, the team kind of plays together and works together to make it all happen. And during construction, we help with the change orders and the schedule and the punch list. The contractor usually is putting together the schedule, and the punch list is the items that we see at the end of the project that still need to be accomplished. So maybe there's a piece of hardware missing, or some touch-up paint has to be done, those kind of things. And then, of course, your success, so that you get to move forward into your clinic. The next part of the slide is a small little dental office story, just to kind of guide you through one. This was a project up in Duluth, Minnesota that we did with a startup dentist. She had been working for another clinic and decided to start her own. So we first put together, based on her program requirements that we had already met with her and talked to her about. You can see I have some slides of rough concept drawings. So these are what I can call bubble diagrams. It shows bubbles for different shapes and areas. So if you look at the first one, option A, it shows 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are the treatment rooms. You see them on the left side. And then on the right side is a waiting room, reception, office, break room kind of over in there. If you go to the next slide, option B, we flip the treatment rooms and they're over on the right side now. And the reception and office are on the left. The next slide, we actually took it and went to the next step, made them a little more refined. You can see they're starting to have walls and doors shown and stuff. And this is option A again, just kind of refined more. The next one is option B, which is also, that one has the treatment rooms on the right again. And then when we go from there, we go into option C, which is actually the one we basically built from. And that is kind of a combined A and B, really. And the reception and waiting is on the left side. Treatment rooms are on the right. They're in a little different configuration. But as things progress, we change things around a little bit. And then from there, the next stage is the design development drawings. Those are a little bit more refined. We start to show the wall thicknesses better. We start to show, more exact dimensions, where structure might be. Some things like that start to enter into it. At this point, with those drawings, we bring it to one of your team members, which would be a contractor, to price. And so they'll put together rough budgeting numbers, it's not a true final construction budget, but it's a good number to work with. It's probably within 10 or 15% of what the final will be one way or another. But that way you start to see what the real dollars are, whether we're on budget. If we're not, if we're over, we can actually add things or take things away, that we had added in. And if we find that we're below budget at this point, we can put some of the things that you wanted or that we didn't know that we could afford back into the project. So then once we get past that stage, we go into construction drawings. I'm just going to go through these rather quickly. The first page is sort of a code plan. We review all the codes, the building codes, accessibility codes, and everything to make sure that the space is going to work for getting a permit and be safe and allow for full accessibility. The next plan is like a true floor plan with dimensions for the contractor to work off of. And then we go on to our reflected ceiling plan, and we have a power plan. We show where all the power is going, where all the data is going, so outlets and data plugs. We have all the lighting. We specify the lights, where they're going to go, how they're going to be switched, where the switches are even going to be. The next slide is a finish plan and details. So there we start to show all the different colors and materials you might have in your clinic, and also where they might go. So we work as interior designers as well to work through that with you. And typically we'll actually bring you into our office, show you different palettes of different colors and finishes that we can use for your clinic. And each one is independent. We design it specifically for your clinic. Then we get into more detail as the drawings progress. The next slide is interior elevations and details. Those show the cabinetry and how the cabinetry is going to work, where you're going to have cabinet doors, where you're going to have shelving, how many shelves, how the doors open, all of that for your lab, for your break room, even for your consult room, things like that. And then here's a few pictures of that project. So here's a picture of before when I first went out there the first time. It was really, really cold that day. It was like 10 or 15 below zero. Then the next picture shows it on a nicer day with plants outside once they had moved in. And then we go on, and there's a before picture, which shows this used to be a service station. And the before picture kind of shows this kind of service area. The floor is all beat up. When you go to the next picture, that's actually the same shot, same angle, everything, showing the new reception desk and what's there now. So you can take a really, really ugly duckling and turn it into a swan sometimes.
Yeah, those are neat.
And we have another before, which shows kind of some windows and a door off to the right. Lots of stuff hanging all over. The very next picture shows that same door for the waiting area and the reception area. And then we're showing some windows off to a door on the left and windows up ahead. Lots of stuff laying on the floor, and that turned into where the treatment rooms are.
Yeah, those are great.
And then there's just a few other pictures of treatment rooms, how the clinic really looks as you go through them, to the sterile and sterile accessory kind of cabinets, and then the last picture shows kind of an inset picture on the upper left, and it, sorry about that, and it shows kind of the reception desk. After we did this project, they were doing so well, they decided to expand into the space next door to them. They actually ended up buying the building ultimately, and we had designed the project to allow for that expansion, so we expanded the reception desk and opened the wall up and created a little kids area, and went from there. And so you can kind of see that picture there.
Yeah, that's really neat.
And that's all I have.
Well, that's awesome, Bob. I think this is great. I mean, in terms of anyone ever wanting to think about building or buying or getting into their own practice, I think this is a great presentation just to learn what to expect, kind of the basics A to Z. So at least they're familiar with the process. Yeah, I love.
Yeah, but they should know that there's people there to help them through all that.
Yeah.
So it's not just them kind of hanging out there themselves trying to do it. If you get the right people, they're going to help you through the whole process, and it'll be, as painless as it can be, really.
Yeah, that's great. And I think I like a lot of the marketing concepts. I mean, you and I would seem to work pretty closely in terms of when I coach or my marketing company works with dentists. Our goal is to help them build that identity and that feel and that message to patients. And then basically exactly what you said, you take it and your job is to turn it into the physical space that they walk into. So it's really important that those are continuous, that your logo and your colors and your smells and your pictures and the design are all integrated and speaking the same message. So I love it. I think you guys do really cool work. And that's Bob's email down there, Bob Schafer, bob@foundationarch.com. Send Bob a question if you guys need any help. But thanks a lot, Bob.